Well, hello there. I'm Lance Vader, and I'm back to teach you about economics. Economics is awesome. And in our first lesson, we taught our students about scarcity, markets, and trade, right? And those are kind of the very fundamentals of economics. And if you didn't do that during the lesson, then after the lesson, you should use the game to teach everybody about those three things. Scarcity means there's not enough resources to go around. There may have been enough resources for everyone to survive, but there weren't enough resources for everybody to survive and also get the 6 food that they needed to get the bonus. Um, and whichever one there was more of, food or clothing, the people who produced that were not in a very good shape, and you can probably point that out. That's going to lead into supply and demand. Um, but right now, at the very basic level, you should be teaching about scarcity. Right. So scarcity, and maybe ask everybody which one was more scarce, the food or the clothes, and why was that one more scarce? And you get some very insightful answers there. Now, so the second thing you want to teach them is about markets and trade. How every single person who traded, they weren't forced to trade because nobody was stealing from anybody. That meant that all of the trades were win-win. In other words, the trade, you could say, is made of win. Uh, so everybody who traded got to win. They got to get something that they wanted. And and if anybody lost, it's because they didn't get to trade enough, right? So they didn't get to trade the material. They couldn't find anybody to trade with who had excess materials. Now, those people who lost, if they're who died, their characters died in the first game. Um, you need to reassure them. You need to be, very um, reassuring to them that there will be plenty of opportunities to catch up. There will be lots of new jobs that are being invented, and whenever there's a new job being invented, nobody's going to be better at it than the new guy. Nobody's going to be worse either, but nobody's going to already have an advantage at those new jobs, and a lot of them are going to be better than the jobs that exist right now. And that really should mollify them and help them to get through it. One of the reasons I like introducing character death as a mechanic is that A, it motivates students, and B, it teaches students to persevere through difficult challenges. And that's one of the things that school is supposed to do. By the way, I'm wearing a colored shirt and tie today because I'm teaching economics, and I think that's very appropriate. And that is the wrong way. Okay, to adjust my tie. All right, so and now for our second lesson. Our second lesson is going to have a little bit of comparative advantage and a little bit of risk versus reward. So we are going to introduce a new job. But before we introduce a new job, all of the people who won last game, all the people who got 6 food and 2 clothes, should not be very many of those people because there's not enough resources for everybody to have that many. At most half the class, probably a lot fewer than half of the class got that. Anyway, um, those people who got 6 food and 2 clothes, they are going to get 1 experience point, and they can. Here's how experience points work in this game. When you have an experience point, you can put it into a job that your character already knows about. So in this case, you can put it into either scavenging or clothes making. And remember that scavenging is not super reliable, but it produces food, and clothes making produces clothes. Um, so you explain that to them. You also explain that their resources, their food and their clothing, are going to be depleted today. That a lot of that is going to go away just because they ate stuff and they used up their clothes. Because it's zombie survival, and in this zombie survival world, people rip their clothes all the time. It's silly, it's funny, yeah, you'll have a laugh. but everybody's going to rip their clothes. So um, uh, here's what you do: you assign experience points, and then you deplete resources. Right. So we need to say, all right, everybody, you ate 4 food. Okay, if you have 4 or more food, you ate 4 of it. Um, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to explain. The experience points are going to allow those people who have experience points to do better at those jobs. So if you have an experience point and you put it into a job, then you will be better at that job. You will get +1 item. So if you have an experience point and you put it into um, clothes making, you will make 1 additional set of clothes. If you have an experience point and you put it into scavenging, you will get 1 additional item of food when you scavenge. Okay? So that should be fairly simple. Now, um, for the next part, we're going to introduce we're going to deplete the resources. Everybody's going to eat 4 food, and they're going to rip up or use up 1 set of clothing. Okay, it's the zombie apocalypse. Everybody's really rough on their clothes, and they all just fall apart because they're not very well made. It's they're not as well made as clothes that are made by professionals. You guys are just survivors. So it's silly. It's dumb. In real life, you don't lose 1 set of clothes per week. I know, but just roll with it. So everybody eats four pieces of food, and they use up 1 item of clothing. At least everybody who survived, everybody whose character didn't die, they're going to do that. Um, and then if they had fewer than 4 items of food, you say, okay, you guys, you didn't starve to death, but you didn't get as much food as the body wants, right? So you guys are you survived, you're fine, but you guys are going to be hungry, and that'll have some consequences that we'll talk about later, okay? So just mark that down on your character sheet. Today your character is hungry. All right. Now the new people, the people who died last time, and now they have a new character. So we just start over fresh. That's the nice thing about games. Whenever you lose, you can just start right over. And so these people have a new character sheet, and they get to start with either 8 food or 4 clothes, just like the people from last week. Um, and obviously, they'll need to trade in order to survive. Remind everybody needs 2 food and 2 clothing in order to survive. Um, all right, now we get to the fun part. So last time we just sort of gave everybody a whole bunch of food and a whole bunch of clothing, but that's not really where resources come from, is it? Right. Where resources come from is people make them, or they harvest them, or they assemble them, or something. They come from people. So the food is gathered by the scavengers, and the clothing is manufactured by the clothes makers. All right. So, and you're going to need a die for this. You're gonna need a 6-sided die. A cube of any kind will work just fine. The scavengers, when they go scavenging, they will roll that 6-sided die, and whatever number comes up, that's how much food they get. If they decide to put an experience point into scavenging, then they get an additional food when they scavenge. All right. Now, clothes makers, being that their job is a little different, they don't have to go out and find canned foods in the stores that are full of zombies and run away if those zombies are really aggressive. No, they can stay in the camp where it's relatively safe. So if you are a clothes maker, then you will make say 3 sets of clothing. You'll just make 3 sets of clothing. And if you have an experience point and you put it into clothes making, then instead of 3, you'll make 4 sets of clothing. All right. And then to make things a little more complex, if your character is currently hungry, if they didn't get the 4 food that they really should have had, then um, they're going to be worse at scavenging. Okay, so instead of getting, um, so if they roll a 6 or a 5 while scavenging, they'll actually just eat one of those pieces of food before they even coming back. Um, and Yeah, that's what happens when you go shopping while you're hungry. So there you have it. But if the hungry people decide to manufacture clothes, no penalty. They're fine. So there you have it. You have these people who are scavenging, these people who are making clothes, and you can tell that they're not making a whole lot of resources. They're making very few resources, and so they're going to have to. And nobody's making both food and clothing, so they're going to have to trade in order to survive. And today, you tell them, okay, last time if you got 6 food, you won the game, right? You got an experience point. Today, you're going to get an experience point if you have 3 sets of clothing. Okay, so if you have 3 sets of clothing and 2 or more food, you survive and you get an experience point bonus, right? If you have 4 food, then you're not going to be hungry. If you have 4 food and 3 clothing, man, you are just doing awesome. Okay. Um, and I think that's enough complexity that we don't need to add anything else. When I had initially designed this game, I had sort of wanted to put the a new job to do here, but I'm thinking that this is enough complexity for one day. So the next job will have to wait until next week. Um, and You will find that everyone has to trade to survive again. And there are going to be a lot of people who decide to make clothing because they're hungry, right? Because they're not as good at scavenging. And there's going to be a lot of people who decide to go scavenging because there's a great amount of reward possible. But then again, it's not guaranteed. So what's going to happen if somebody rolls a 1? Maybe their character dies, but there's going to be a new job next week that somebody can take, and nobody will be any better at it than you if you're a new character. So yeah, life is hard. You feel free to adjust these numbers up a little if you feel that they're too harsh or that that's going to have too many character deaths. But when my class does the zombie apocalypse, man, it gets real. It's serious. All right, thank you very much. And this has been the outline for the second week of our economics game. And as always, stay safe. Knowledge is power. Be awesome.